Greetings all. Welcome again to the Three Voices. We have a fun topic. We always think we have a fun topic. Tonight's topic is what benefit do we derive from an enlightened life, a more enlightened means of living? And my first thought on that is that people experience enlightenment slightly differently. So there are variations in what benefits people will receive from it. But a starting point, from my point of view, would be a reduction in identity attachments. It's not that we would plan that. We would just try and be more in the present and less focused on meanderings in our mind going back and forth between the past and the future. Once we start making the attempt to be free, or at least more free, or less focused on what's in our mind and more focused on just being in the present we're in, changes occur in us as a result of that that alter our perception of reality. How that alteration takes place and what benefit it is to each individual is going to vary, as I mentioned earlier. So it's a little difficult to say exactly, but there are some things, at least in my experience, that are somewhat equivalent between people, one of which is scale of vision. That is, much of the time when we're in our head, focused on egocentric representations of reality, the problem with that, or a problem with that, is myopia. That is, that we see too little of what can be seen and can be experienced. So we're living less of a life than we're capable of. So being more in the present, being more enlightened, and living in the effort to be more enlightened enhances our relationship with reality. It expands it. And for me, one of the things that does repeat, and I think for many people, at least in my experience so far, is that reality is so much bigger than our general perception of it, that once we start to experience that, the ego just has less room in our mind. It's not like we do something to slow down the ego or minimize it. It's just that this greater scale of vision perspective starts to override the ego perspective, and our sense of value in the world changes from something actually quite small that's exaggerated in our mind to something quite large, which we actually can't define. But it is meaningful, at least to my mind, it is meaningful to us to begin to experience that change through the effort to be more in the present and live that way. That would be, in my mind, a means of enlightened living. So what do you guys think?
Well, I want to ask you a question
Oh,
just to get further clarification. And I would ask that you, for the moment at least, turn the lens on yourself and say, well, and I understand how enlightened living, I mean, I experience that enlightened living will can reduce identity attachment and increase the scale of vision, the scope of vision. But what's your experience of that? Like, why is that of benefit to you? I mean, it's like a physical thing that happens, but why is that a good thing worth pursuing in more of in the course of life?
well, from
In your experience, not in terms of everybody else.
Rob, no, for me, what I notice about myself is that what what I refer to as Thomas. I mean, when the name comes up and I'm seeing myself as an individual trying to achieve higher levels of perspective, what comes most frequently to me is a kind of window uh, where I see through myself into a world without me in it. And that window, it's a little like the state is a little like, rather this, the state is a little like the air in an open window. Where does the air, where's the air, the inside of the window, and where's the air, the outside of the window? Where is that division? in some way, when we enter the present, it's like entering that space in an open window between what is inside the window and what is outside the window. It's very difficult to put a definition on it because every definition is past tense, which then removes us from being in the present. But I just find in the change of scale of vision, the detail, for example, in the environment around me. I mean, for all of us right now and all our listeners, we're all somewhere, sitting somewhere, standing somewhere, whatever. In the environment we're in, how much of what we can be aware of are we actually aware of in that environment, including ourselves in it? It won't be as much as it will be as soon as we start putting our attention on being in the present. And for me, that generates a greater value in life for me. That is my experience of life is is expanded by that, and I feel a reward in that. I feel a benefit in that because we only live for a very short period, but and we can't live in a way longer. We can try, but basically what we can change or what we can add more definitely to our daily life is greater depth of living. We can penetrate the present more deeply and gain greater insight. I mean, all conscious beings before us experience the same consciousness in a way, although it differs in individuals overall how we interpret it. But the experience of being free or less restricted by the ego is just it's a wonderful feeling, I feel, for me. So my personal thing, because ego puts a lot of pressure on us to be something, to do something, to think in a particular way. And once you're free of that and you're just present, it's a great relief. And one wants, at least for me, I want to keep that as much as I can. I want to make it through this life as awake as I can be. Is that
So
Yeah,
it?
well, that sounds pretty good. I
yeah,
want to say,
that gives, go ahead.
no, I want to say, Thomas, that I thought this topic might reveal a few more deeper understandings between us. And what you just said, I made many different notes, all very positive. Um, I think part of the problems I have in connecting sometimes with, quote, the path you've chosen down the mountain is often what do you see when you get down there? It wasn't clear to me. And Rob's asked that well, but what I think you said was amazing. There's a few different things, more than one or two things you said, and I want to get back to you, Rob, before I take too long on it. But I want to keep it out there that what I think um, what I think really happens here is very, very difficult to explain. And I was thinking myself, how am I going to answer that? Okay. And, what you said gave a little trigger to open up exactly how I might answer that. Because, why we do it for the benefit of others is easy or service. But why we do it and what we think it does for us is not easy. What do you think, Rob?
Um, yes, I try not to. No. Uh, the value that I get from enlightened living, I like the word relief that Thomas used. I also get uh, better focus, and focus comes through practicing focus in a conscious way through meditation and other practices. And in having that focus, I find I'm not only relief, but relaxation and clarity, and also compassion for myself and others. And out of that compassion comes connection and joy. And so all those things are accessible. I could go on, maybe I should a little bit. Um,
Yeah, good.
I find I'm less anxious. I find that I am more creative, which serves me in anything, from anything as simple as making people laugh to solving problems at work. And it's tremendously valuable if you're become a better problem solver by virtue of a more enlightened practices and living. I'm more grateful and appreciative of that which is around me. I mean, I laugh at things. I hear I hear people express their points of view, and I appreciate them. I'm more appreciative of them because my brain isn't churning. I'm more receptive to what's being said, and my heart is literally more open. And that I find that to be very, very valuable. So I'll pause it there and turn it over to you, Rick.
Well,
Arts.
yeah, that's the interesting part. Again, I tend to talk a little bit about our differences so that we could give others an insight into the different routes. But like I had said many times, I felt that the vast majority of our observations and thought were really quite similar. And on this subject, it appears to be, I wouldn't say identical, but I would say extremely similar. And part of the reasoning is a combination of several things said. I feel I will be slightly redundant. I'm probably not going to come up with anything new than from those two positions because you kind of like said the point. You got to think that you spending lifetimes, you too, okay, spending lifetimes pursuing this path of enlightened living, um, that there had to be some benefit and some cognitive or perceptive change in reality, that of the world around us. So I will echo that. I will say that, you know, Thomas, again, you follow that path of being more aware and in the moment, and that's perfect, okay, for you. But what you said that really got me positive was to be in that mode, we have less identity or ego attachment, and that getting in that mode enhances reality and your perceptions of it. Rob, you throw that with a key word I wrote down from you is clarity. Okay, compassion is a great word too. Um, very, very hard to say. I remember years ago when I was I reluctantly call me a young man, but it was many decades ago, pursuing a quote, claimed teacher, master. And they told me they could levitate things. And when I got to their level, I'd be able to do it. And all I did was sit there and ask, let me see it. Let me see it. And, how far am I wrong from, anything I should have been asking? That's not, what I pursue or looking to do. We hear stories of pure masters or gurus that have many of these psychic powers. And even Pantajali has almost a complete third section on describing the powers that come with pure thought and pure awakeness or awareness. But that's not me. And so now taking that to me, what it is I emphasize the words just a little differently, but the same end result of living life without attachment, okay, without being a responsive mechanism, being an independent entity. Where we differ sometimes, Thomas, is you say you forget about Thomas, and there is no I at that point. I say it's quite the opposite. What happens is my I is now soul infused or infused with a greater vision than just before me. So it does alter the way I see reality, and it does alter the way I work within it. Um, I certainly emphasize the words harmlessness and compassion. I use them on a regular basis, certainly in our chats all the time, but even on a daily basis in my living. So I think what enlightened living does, or excuse me, allows, is us to be more free to do what we want to do and free ourselves from the compulsion, the instinctual, the emotional reactions that have been conditioned through living in this world. We don't necessarily change what we see out there, but what we see is different because what we see is a connectiveness, a unity. But asked to describe it, there's no words I could give for that. It's a feeling. What words do you give to describe clarity? Okay, you can't really. I mean, you see more clearly. I think a clarity is, in my mind, a byproduct of being able to understand what's happening. By separating oneself from the ego, we're allowing ourselves to look at what's happening around us and not instinctually, yeah, instinctually or emotionally respond, but decide for ourselves, hopefully intelligently and rationally, but certainly free of bonds. So that's my thoughts on why, or not why, what I get out of it. And I'll throw in one more thing too. I read hundreds, maybe I'm lying, tens, tens of twenties of reports of people that have, boom, become enlightened. And more reports of those talking about other planes of existence and beings on those other planes. Um, I've never seen them. Um, I never closed my eyes and floated through the universe. Okay. But I did meditate and look outside and just feel a joy that I couldn't explain why. Okay. I was just happy. I was just happy to be there. And then I was happy to see someone that walked by. I was happy to talk to somebody. And even when something went wrong, ooh, that's terrible. But, let's get past that. And can I help? So that's my thoughts that it's detachment and living life with harmlessness and compassion that we get from following this path or being aware.
I think
I'm a little uncomfortable with you being so agreeable.
So what?
Agreeable.
Oh,
let's see if
And
it,
well, you could still disagree. You like
so
that.
no. I don't want to disagree. I do like that, but I would like to prompt you to reflect on another dimension of enlightened living that I see you manifest. And I think it's tremendously valuable, and I would like to point it out and then have you comment on it.
Right.
And that is, and it has to do with the word freedom, but it's beyond and soul infused personality. But
Right.
I think as a result of those attributes that I see in you, I see showing up in you, that you and it maybe it ties to Thomas's scale of vision, but you are not only free to do what you want, but you have the, whether it's courage, capacity, imagination, or whatever, to envision big things, creative things that go beyond the ordinary, that are actively pursued, but are linked to attributes of enlightened living, like soul infused and freedom. And I'd like you to comment on that, because I see that a lot in you, and I've seen it in you for many, many decades.
Yeah. Well, we should start with flattery will get you everywhere, and we could go from that. There's an old saying on my wall, and I really have it here. Mountains of gold would not seduce some men, yet a wee bit of flattery, and they will give up their empire. So, that wasn't it, because I don't have an empire, and you ain't getting nothing now. Okay, but all joking aside, no, thank you. But Rob, part of I think enlightened living. Okay, and if I may be so bold, part of what I tried to coach you to break too. Don't be sorry. Don't be reluctant. Don't be modest to be who you are. When you have a talent, okay, when you have an ability, use it. Okay. And primum non sine, first of all, do no harm. If you use that talent to benefit yourself, your family, those you work with, okay, but not at the disadvantage or the malfeasance or, the demise of others, okay, and that's where harmlessness and compassion come in my side of implementing activity. Uh, but you have to be able to say, and I used to teach the sales classes and young salespeople uh, about selling. If you remember way back when, a couple of my sessions you attended even. But the critical event, Rob, was confidence. Okay. And very nicely, you called it courage. Other people could call it foolishness, because if courage is what drives someone forward when others are not or staying back, okay, well, it is a bit of courage, but it is more that of vision. And so I think enlightened living says to me, okay, I see things, I try to see things as they really are, or what's missing from them. Part of why I've been somewhat successful in something that's non-monetary at all, and that's resolving conflict. Okay. I have been called on almost most of my life to resolve conflict in many situations. Certainly, the most elemental kind would be, a business negotiation. But then, more importantly, family interaction with expanding families, sons, daughters, cousins, nephews, nieces. Okay. We're all different people and personalities, and many times the closeness of family causes volatile reactions. And so we need the ability to set back and be not attached in those situations and see both sides. Okay. And that's the critical element in, I think, relating to others. As far as vision in creating new enterprise or businesses or opportunity, I think I'm one of a very large group. I mean, percent, and probably far from the best of them. I admire people that see things that others don't. Um, Thomas, an artist, a musician, is very much like, out of that mold, at least a creative one, meaning a musician that plays other people's work is still a great musician, but the ones that create it, okay, or the ones that write a book, okay, the ones that bring essence into being, okay. And Rob, that's what I do. And I would consider myself an artist in the world of business and enterprise. And so I think the way Thomas might see a picture in his head before he paints it, or a writer writes, or a musician just can whip out a hit song, some in minutes, okay, half an hour, something that people will sing forever. Okay, um, that's a creative talent that is really enlightened, and we should understand that people that possess that capability are very much enlightened. And part of what I hope we do is be able to influence some of those type people that don't maximize their returns, that don't maximize their ability to generate comfort with those skills. There are many, many, many great artists, writers, musicians that, live in obscurity. Okay, and their benefit to life is themselves. Okay, which is all of us, by the way, which is how I see mine too. That wasn't a negative comment. That was a very positive comment because we're at peace with our own being. Okay, and that's where, Thomas, your awakeness comes into me. When you are truly awake, at least the way I see it, you're happy. You're free from someone telling you what you should feel, think, or see. And you're in your own zone. That's what I think, Rob.
Very
I,
good.
I could add a few things if I could here. Yeah,
Please.
I have a couple of thoughts. Actually, I have many thoughts. You guys have
Good.
the problem is when I'm listening to you guys, I mean, you automatically stimulate, many potential responses, and one has to kind of, at least as best as possible, sift through them to see what is most pertinent at the moment. So
Opposed to, you mean you want to say fuck off, but you don't?
that's right.
Oh, say that to Rob if you feel that. No.
Trying not to be blunt.
Uh,
There are a couple. Let me just start with this point because I found this interesting. Is that there's a difference between powers and being, and these descriptions. I've also met and talked to people and heard all these stories about these magical things and mystical things that certain people.
Right.
Right. So I thought, let me see, because when one starts entering, let's say, the realm of metaphysics, that is the unverified rules of systems, laws, and processes beyond physics, it becomes very difficult for us in our present state to decipher value in that. So I thought, let me see if I can control my blood flow in my body because I'd heard these stories. And so I prepped myself. I was living in England at the time, and I prepped myself for almost 3 weeks, just trying to control my attention. And that attention focused mostly on controlling my body.
Controlling what?
The physical
Okay.
attributes.
Okay. That's why I didn't hear that. Okay.
So because you hear about these people that can do certain things, endure pain and this and that, and not feel things to walk on fire or whatever, and not burn, whatever it is. I mean, these are moments of difference, but not necessarily enlightenment. They are more a question of powers, that is, what control one has over function. And I wanted to see what level I could achieve if I went for powers. In the end, I've chose being over powers because I feel being is more endless than powers. Powers is more limited because it's limited to subject, where being is not. So one of the things I did is I prepared for this event, and I decided I was going to stab myself
Huh.
and stop myself from bleeding. That was the aim, to see if I, after several weeks of preparation, if that was enough to at least perform that little bit of power
Were you
over.
trying not to bleed?
That was the idea, was to
Is
stop
that
my
the goal?
yeah, to stop myself from bleeding was the goal,
Okay.
without, touching it.
I, I, I
Yeah.
I get
So
it.
yeah, so I took a scalpel and I stabbed myself in the hand. Uh, this is what I eventually arrived at. I stabbed myself in the hand, and as the blood just began to beat up, I stopped it from actually bleeding. It just started to bubble up, and I stopped, and it was not a minor stab. I wanted to make sure it was meaningful, and it hurt. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
a occurrence, but I was able to concentrate enough on my blood flow to be able to halt it at that point. And I thought, okay, well, if I wanted to concentrate my attention, as I did for the 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks prior, just focusing and focusing, controlling, 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 from the point of view of overriding the instinctive response to bleeding, the natural response the body's going to have. I wanted to put my mind there instead. And I was able to do that just that one time. And that was enough to tell me that it's possible, if you pursue powers, to control not only your own body, but other people too, which I have no interest in. So my interest, once I realized that that is possible and that people can do that, then my choice was, how much do I want to go down that road? And it wasn't much at all. I thought, no, no, I want to go toward expanding awareness, to creating greater being. And so that's the path I took, rather than powers. So that was,
Me,
sorry.
but that's very interesting. I understand what you were looking for, and you seem to have done it. And by the way, not necessarily the result of any great enlightenment, but there have been mega studies about people being able to control their body, blood flow, temperature, breathing, all these things. And for what it's worth, I actually had what's the Korean art of kicking? Oh God,
Um,
like what's that? Not
Taekwondo,
what's that?
Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. That's how long ago it was I took it. But my teacher was a seventh degree black belt that went back to Korea. And in one of his demonstrations, he took a motorcycle spike and put it through the bottom of his arm and hung a bucket from it, and no blood and anything. It was pretty wild. But the bottom line to that is okay. And now I understand what you said, Thomas. You said, but that wasn't for me, right? What was for you? What did you say? But was
just being more aware.
okay.
Because for me, the concept of being, for example, like we were talking earlier, is that we're in the present with all these other, we're not in the present alone. Everything that's in the present with us also has energy. It's not, nothing is without energy. So what starts to happen, at least in my case with the expanse of
Okay.
being, is that being begins to embrace a greater and greater world of being in the present with you, where you can sense in some way. I mean, the awareness senses, or there's some recognition of some kind in the awareness of the presence in the moment with you of all these other things, from whether from a chair to a typewriter to anything else that's in the room. All of these things that we're sharing the present with are contributing to the present, and we begin to pick that up. And at least that this is what I see being doing. Just being present expands into, in a sense, a perception of everything that's in the present in relation to itself. That is, Thomas, like I've said before, is
Hmm.
seen through. He's not no longer an obstacle to being, and being just keeps growing.
Um, I there is something to be said for not so much testing one's ability to stop the flow of blood, but there is something to be said for the cultivation of that, of almost any, and we could debate whether it's almost any, or maybe there's a lot of things that you don't want to do, but there's a broad field of things. And Patanjali, whose sutras I find very inspiring in terms of the cultivation of awareness
Right.
and advanced states of being. He talks about the notion of samyama, Samyama, which is really, the focus on almost anything to attain concentration, meditation, and
Total grok.
samyama. What?
Total grok.
Total grok. And he didn't use that word, but I
No,
think
he didn't.
that word applies. And
He
so
used Samyana.
I think in particular in my case, I find the cultivation of awarenesses of the senses and the body, whether it's seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, internal perception, the feeling of inside, that the cultivation of those awarenesses bear fruit in terms of this goal of breaking the bonds of attachment, breaking whatever it is that makes one suffer. I just want to throw that out. That so there's, people could get lost in the ego of hanging buckets on spikes that they put through their arm, and that becomes a distraction but it can become a distraction. On the other hand, something like that, or something like any kind of bodily awareness, the practice of, like, I once conducted a workshop at my house where the whole thing was, it was a workshop on sensory awareness. It was conducted by someone else who had studied with one of the gurus in that space. And almost all we did was practice picking. This is one of the practices. We practice picking up small stones and handing it to someone else and having the other person hand us back the stone. We called it giving and receiving. And developing that awareness of giving and receiving had like this, there's something about it. It had a ripple effect that we were able to bring into other activities in our lives. It was very powerful. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, that's interesting. Thomas, you look like you want to say something else, do you? Because
A bunch of thought, like I said earlier, I mean, whenever we have these conversations, I hope people are finding it as beneficial as I do. I mean, I just listening to you guys and going over these things, I always find it's just so,
I think we all learn from each other.
it adds so much. I mean, because we have our own experience, and when we share that as best as we understand it, and other people comment on it, it allows for not only a re-examination, but an increase in profit from that experience, because we learn more from it in the exchange. And so I'm finding when I have something to say, I have 20 things to say, because the depth or the complexity with which your points of view, both of you, enter our dialogue just evokes all kinds of thoughts in me. And so, like, for example, I was thinking about conflict when you're talking about conflict resolution. What in us is insulted? I mean, most conflict derives from some kind of insult, or slight, or or uh, um,
Competing
Right.
desires,
Yeah,
necessarily insult.
no, I was thinking,
I
well,
want what you have. You owe me.
well, most conflict occurs, in my observation, because ego feels insulted. But the only thing that in us that is insulted is ego. Our eyes are not insulted if somebody says something nasty to us. The trees around us are not insulted if somebody says something nasty to us. Our blood is not has no interest or no response to an insult. The only thing that's insulted in us is our ego, and our ego is a perception of self that actually lacks substance. And we so often go with minor substance in response to a slight rather than raising our level of being to a point where that is irrelevant. That comes more, like we were talking earlier in the beginning, the more present we are, the more minimal the opportunity for ego to be insulted, because it is not the primary source of our identity in that moment.
You know,
I just want to add that there's another dimension that I'm not sure it's attached to ego. And this comment is born out of a observation that we are human beings, but we're also animals. And as animals, like even a reptile, um, that reptiles are able to perceive threats in the environment. And so there are certain things that are threatening that it can be connected to ego. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it's possible
those
that,
are threats that are in the external environment, so they are not the ego.
yeah, but
Okay.
it's threatening, it's like threatening, and or it reminds us,
Mhm.
it triggers and there's a term called neuroception, and the ability to respond to a threat, but it might not even enter conscious awareness
Okay.
that one is feeling that way. But the response is not unlike what a reptile might feel, that will cause them to gnash their teeth, attack, to run, or to freeze.
Okay. Oh, by the way, conflict resolution, and I want to deal with both of you two things because I would like to say to the both of you, n'est-ce pas mon ami? No, 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 no. These are things you are talking about that exist. So yes, 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 yes. Threats from the environment, insults from the environment, ego attachments, all of that. Okay. But conflict results from those things. Yes. But detachment allows one to not be threatened, not perceive insult. Okay. For most of my life, the real joke is, and it's very funny, I probably never said it to you guys, when people asked what I did, being a serial entrepreneur and never working at one company, even my own, for more than 4 or 5 years or 6 years. Okay. Uh, the bottom line was building things and making new companies and forming, new companies, new business enterprises. I still said I was always in conflict resolution because nothing happens without you making it happen. Okay. When you start a new company, you have to go out and define your product, define your customer, go get your customer, your market, sell it, make it, all everything that's required, whatever the product may be. And the bottom line to conflict resolution is really, again, detachment. Conflict results when there are two entities that are opposing and not aligned. You see, it could be an external threat, i.e., it could be a landslide, it could be a gun, it could be a robber. It could be bad news about business. It could be a recession in the economy. It could be, Thomas, an insult. Okay. Through the past, I spent a lot of time opening up new territories, and guys from New York weren't always welcome in Birmingham, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi. And I would get names and descriptions of myself that not necessarily are worth repeating here. But instead of acting emotionally to it, I would say to the fellow, well, you do realize I never liked you from the start either, but I'm here. And I'm really very sorry you feel that way, but I don't really care. So the question is, I'm here to see if we're going to do a deal or not. And whether I like you or you like me doesn't make any difference because I don't trust you anyway. And so if we can make a deal, we'll go forward. If not, it's been terrible talking to you, and have a lovely day on your own. And by the way, that gets people more angry than if you tell them to go pop themselves, okay? Because they realize they couldn't insult you. And Rob, you might have even remember something back from way back when from the Scientology times. I didn't know if you took a TR class, which was a training drill that I did when Scientology was first becoming popular. I spent some time there, and they had something called, okay, Tone 40, and they also had another drill, for the lack of better words, uh, I'll call it the insult drill. And they would have a trained person sit in front of you, insult everything. I don't like your nose, your mother is this. By the way, I know your sister, and your family is that, and your school is that. And you see if they could get any emotion. Even though you'd be surprised if you know that it's fake, they could be very convincing. Okay, okay. And the whole idea was you can't bother me. Tone 40 was something as simple like your rock, Rob. But what they did was they would take a pen or an item like that, put it on the table, and then pick it up and tell it to rise to 2 feet. And you do like this. That's pretty easy, okay? Pretty much like your rock back and forth. However, what the idea is to focus on achievement, focus on action, create the response that you want. Okay. That pen isn't getting up in the air unless you lift it. Okay. And that business isn't getting started. That painting ain't getting painted. And that book ain't getting written unless you do it, Thomas. So I think every type of artist, in a way, is a very enlightened individual. I think they start much more enlightened, than the rest of us. And as I say, I later included myself into that realm of artiste by that being one who creates. And I think that might be the essence of art and enlightenment.
I would just add to that. It's an interesting point. I would add at shows periodically, people will ask, they'll say, I just wish I had your talent, right? And I say, well, what is they said they wish they were as creative, not the talent. They said, we wish I was as creative. I said, well, what is the most creative thing we do? It's problem solving, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's problem solving. So problem solving is if I have a structure, if I'm trying to paint something, I have problems to solve, don't I? If you're starting a business, you have problems to solve. If you're sitting down at the computer, Rob, and you have to fix something in your computer or make a new program or something, it's a problem to solve, which
Right.
which requires on our part that we be creative. So what is the difference between my solving a problem and you guys solving a problem? There's no difference in the creative process. It's just a different product at the end of it, where mine comes out as a painting or a book or a piece of music or something like that, and yours comes out as a building or whatever. And Rob has made a new program or set something right.
Thomas, there could be a difference, and that difference is like you are an artist in which the inspiration comes, from within, Okay, I might do the same, Rob might do the same, but there are also people that are very creative and very productive, but they do it out of fear. They do it out of greed. They do it out of a negative or, if you will, harmful disposition, either being the victim or the victimizer. But, you know, just being creative isn't all there is. Okay, the end result does not justify the means. The means are what we're talking about. All three of us have developed our means, or if you will, metaphorically, our path down the mountain.
Well,
So
let me just add here one more thing, if I could.
please,
The point for me in this is that if I have a problem, if there is a problem that needs to be solved, and the end result of solving that problem is a product, the process by which the person involved achieves that solution is very similar, regardless of the end product. And why that's important from my point of view with regard to enlightenment is that we are here telling our audience and believing in ourselves and telling our audience that we are better off the more enlightened we are. Well, that
right?
includes everybody, right? That's everybody. The
Yes,
process of achieving a higher state, an enlightened state, is a problem-solving process because ego is consistently
you
in
could
the
say that. You could say
consistently.
that.
And so we have to figure out. So when I think about being labeled a person of greater creativity or greater capacity to solve problems than the average person, I think it's not correct because anyone, unless there's some damage to the brain or whatever, who cannot be more conscious in this moment we're in now? Like we say in the beginning, we're all alive right now and we can live more fully in the moment we're in. Who is not capable of that?
Well,
That requires solving problems.
excuse me, who's not guilty? Thomas, there are a major percentage of people. And Rob, before we get to sign off, I've got to tell you, I made my note and didn't do it. Though I am detached and do not respond to insult, you could call a reptile and you could call me Johnson, but you cannot call me a reptile. Okay. And I am not an animal. Okay. And you could say a human is an animal, but a soul infused personality is not an animal. What we've done is secured, destroyed, or at least chained up the animal tendency or the animal soul that is there from birth, but does have to be controlled. And so I
I'm
do
not saying you
believe,
can't control your animal nature, but you are one.
I know that. And I said, n'est-ce pas? Right. Now, I could answer in the affirmative. Okay. Thomas, you said you don't like that someone says I'm, not
Just
you
think,
don't like, but you
I
said, no, I'm not different. But
no,
you're
no,
right.
I
No,
just
you're
think
right. What I'm
Well,
trying to say
I
to
think
you
we need to
before,
wrap up. I think we need to
yeah,
wrap up.
this
Yeah.
is the one of the wrap up points. What I'm saying, Thomas, is there are countless, I don't know if it's the majority of creative people that are not enlightened, okay,
Mhm.
that are not, okay. They have the creative ability that this is, if you will, talent or trait, but sometimes people produce for the wrong reasons. I must make some money. My boss is getting, my wife's going to do it. If I don't do it, people won't like me. I had one success. I got to keep going because if I don't have more, they'll think I'm no good. So creativity alone is not a evidentiary point of enlightenment, but it is a starting point, and it is something that is enhanced by enlightenment. And that's one of the closing comments that creativity, my closing comment, creativity and, if you will, maximum will and joy are the reasons I practice the discipline of enlightened living.
Wonderful. Be here now or be nowhere.
Rob, you want to throw any closing thought to the evening?
I wonder if these problems that serve as obstacles to enlightened living, are they really problems, or are they like a slip knot? You just need to know where to pull on the rope and boom, it's gone.
I like that.
There you go. We'll have to see and tune in next time
Yeah.
to find out maybe obstacles to living an enlightened life.
Mm.
All right, gentlemen and fellow voices.
Audience, goodbye. Thank you for joining.